fee to go to building and planning, and building and planning sends it on to council. Do we work that? Just out of curiosity, do we work that way? I mean, this business has been, like I said, I think this was the 4th or 5th time it's come before their council down there. And I was curious, why does it keep coming up? And I said, well, they pay a fee to building and planning reviews it and passes it on to council. So as long as they pay that fee every time.
Yeah, that's not the county building and planning.
No, that's,
No. I'm just,
so that's probably, that's like what, not knowing what you're talking about, I think it's something that if we take a permit in, and then it would go to like our planning commission, and then it would circle back just because of what our laws and ordinances say, then it goes back to the board if it's quasi judicial or legislative. So I don't know what they're applying for that would do that.
Well, I think it's the composition of the council there changes, and they're thinking they'll try until they succeed.
Yeah.
There's nothing that precludes that from happening here. but
No, they
I've
can
never
continue
seen
to
it.
do that too, right?
okay,
Right.
that's all I was curious about. I don't really care one way or the other. I was just,
And you're fully staffed at the 6 FTEs?
I think 6 is, I think it's rounded up. I think it's 4.81 or 4 point, it's a percentage.
Right.
Because portions of like several of our salaries come out of this fund because we do stuff generally, and then we do stuff specific for permits. So like part of Doug's time, part of Mike, myself, Adam, I mean, we all kind of get split kind of to what
Okay.
we're working on. But
Understood.
on this
Okay, thank
fund,
you.
yes, and the other fund, we have the one that you gentlemen approved for us last week or the week before, the Code Tech for the plans exam. So we're actively filling that one. It's out to the public right now.
Interesting. That could be reported as the actual people, and then G&A for the additional 1.5 equivalent.
I'll get the details and double check the numbers
Okay.
on this. I'll re-verify the 6 FTEs.
Yeah. Because if you look at the other fund, the building and planning fund, the 41601, the back page of that, they've got 2 open positions and then year to date 3. We only have the 1. We gave up 2 to get the 1 last week approved.
This hasn't been up
Yeah, so
Because
it's,
it's still 24.
and again, it's just portions of people's time and what they get paid.
Well, the news seems a bit encouraging coming out of Washington DC in terms of lowering interest rates, Fed action. So I'm assuming as these things go within the next 6 months, you may be slammed with backlog, and we're going to want to
That'd
need
be
extra.
great. We'd welcome
You
it.
need more personnel. But
We,
it's one of those things, it's very difficult to budget for because the control is really out of our hands. We react to the
need.
market.
Yep.
Yeah.
In that same fund, 41601, are we there, or?
Yes, we can move to building and planning financials.
The work being done for Castle Rock would appear here under income?
Yes, it would appear here. We haven't done anything for them yet, but
Well,
we've
which
been
of the
included with
categories?
some of their stuff, but not, no permits as of yet.
Would that come under miscellaneous?
It'd be goods and services. It's a
Goods and services.
personal services agreement with them. And then any money we get from the city of Kelso as well goes in that.
And I noticed the auditors are requiring a whole new set of forms and
All
agreements
that, yep,
to do business with, even within the county government,
Yes.
different departments have to be recorded separately now, and as far as auditing is going. Did you catch that? Did you get that notice?
Yeah,
We
that
got
was-
emails from Carolyn saying,
Oh.
here's what we've got to do
Oh,
now
yeah.
because of
Yeah, that
Gatsby.
just came out last week.
Is it Gatsby or Gatsby?
Gatsby.
Gatsby. So on building and planning, their revenues are budgeted a little over $4.7 million, $4,700,000. They brought in, that included their beginning fund balance. But they've brought in almost $2.6 million in revenues. They're just slightly behind on their licenses and permits, and also slightly behind. They're actually very comparable to last year on their goods and services. They brought in a little over almost $1.1 million. So anyway, I'm not sure that they they may be just a little slightly under budget when we finish the year.
So you're not anticipating using the reserves?
no.
No. Mm-mm.
That's what we use to, if we need budget capacity
Yep.
because of an increase,
Yep.
that's.
And we
where
would use our ending fund balance to cover any
Right.
costs to get us by until the revenue or the expenditures
Yeah.
came blaring in.
The good news is, when you go to page 2, which is their expenses, all of their expenses are under budget. And they're below targets at this point in time. So, for example, personnel, they've got budgeted almost $2.2 million, and they currently are sitting at 1.9. So they're under budget in their largest category there. And they're under budget on all the other ones as well. I believe the transfer has something to do with a prior year adjustment or an accounting adjustment for year end, so. And
But-
like Tracy said, that we haven't updated their budget, but it budgeted positions for the action that was approved, I think, a little over a week ago.
Mhm.
So that hasn't been updated yet. So it shows that they have 15 filled positions this year with 2 open.
So I'm trying to figure out something that seems strange. The shortfall on the roof revenues, you say is going to be offset by lower expenses?
Lower
and
expenses. Lower than budgeted.
Exactly offset? Or,
No,
I mean, plus or minus 10% or something like that?
I don't know.
Probably less than that,
Yeah.
probably less than 10%.
Mhm.
Oh. Okay. How did we get ourselves where we estimated the revenue so high compared to the actuals?
Last year's for example, last year's on licenses and permits, the year end number was 1.5 million. And we budgeted for this year 1.6. So they budgeted slightly above last year, but not significantly. We also, this is as of the end of November, really. So we still have one more month of revenues to come in.
It's interesting how you managed to do that. It's a tough job to get the revenue loss compensated by the lower expenses.
And I think that's primarily because, like Tracy said, they've had 2 positions vacant and held those.
We've held them open. It makes a difference.
Yeah, but then I would read that the two positions vacant they were not necessary.
Right.
Is that still true?
Yep. That's why I asked for them to be inactivated last week and put our resources where we do need them on the building side, being that we're taking over Castle Rock's building January. So I just want to make sure our resources are in place for what the current trend is.
Well, it is interesting. I know there's one development that had been platted, that North Lexington,
Yes,
and I don't think any of the homes have been built yet
they haven't.
because of the interest rates went up, and then those probably some other issues involved as well. but-
There are some other issues. They haven't gotten their final plat finished yet because they've had some issues with some of their preliminary approval
Okay.
items on their list that they had to get done. I've heard that, I thought that, I was worried that development was not going to happen because it was stuck on a couple items, but they've got some movement now on it. And we're very excited for it because we really do need the housing. So it would be nice if they do finish the
Roads
subdivision.
are in, that's the interesting part, so,
Yep.
yeah. So hopefully those, it's just so tied to the interest rates and whether people are
Yeah.
able to finance new construction. And
Are you done with me?
Yeah.
So I was just gonna give the board a heads up that we've started taking over some preliminary meetings with the city of Castle Rock. And we're meeting with them again today, work out any kinks that we have, and we're planning on going live in January to do all their building, fire, plan review. So they'll still be going to their office as far as we're understanding, and then we'll be doing all of their work. So we're very excited about that. Nice that they reached out. And then to turn the channel to make enough of building and planning. Thank you for the two of you for allowing me to go down to building and planning and take a crack at it and see what I could do. So you can't build with someone who isn't trying to help you carry the bricks. So I really appreciate what you've done, the support that the two of you have given myself, the department, and all of the staff that we've needed. So we have a little token for you guys. Don't laugh at the artistry, but we have something for you.
A free house?
A free house
Yeah.
with an ADU.
Well, I was going to ask you, Tracy, do you plan on franchising now? We do Castle Rock, you might want to do others.
I'm sure Woodland would love to give it up.
Heavens to Murgatroyd.
I was being sarcastic. I don't think they would want to. Oh, nice.
Oh, the PNP, yes.
It is a house with an ADU. I love it.
Thank you.
So we wanted to
That's
give
the
you
ADU.
a token of our, for building and planning. You can see we have environmentally friendly. We've got the rivers, the fish, we've got some forestry
The
going
fish.
on. We just want to thank you guys and lighten up the day for you today. So
Well,
thank you very much. Yep,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
For
you.
everything.
Oh,
And don't eat it.
Well, you are aware that I started my local public service in the Cowlitz County Planning Commission back in 1977.
Yes.
And I actually volunteered for that job when I read in the paper that a Longview City Councilman was stepping off of the Planning Commission. And I thought, oh, boy, having a council member and a county planning commission working together makes a lot of sense because the boundaries, the city limits of Longview and West Longview has never made any sense at all. And I thought, well, it would make good sense that we have some planning coordination so we can straighten out those boundaries. So I volunteered and I got appointed. And as I said, I was on it until for about 7 years. and never did straighten out those boundaries. And even today, there's still just a crazy quilt of confusing zigs and zags that don't follow natural boundaries for the most part. And
You are
it's just crazy. And I learned early on, one of the lessons you learn when you listen to people is if they wanted to be in the city, they'd move to the city. They do not want to change, even though they're paying more for urban services and
Yes, they
you know,
are.
it's just amazing. So anyway, in this business, you learn. And if,
So just to close out that one, we needed you very badly down in building and planning. We've been bleeding there for years. By bleeding, I mean unhappy customers. And that seems to be a thing of the past. And it coincides with you taking over the department.
I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with. So thanks to Mike and Adam now too. We can't, I mean, it's a team effort and we can't make everybody happy. We try, but you know, regulations are what they are. And we try to find the most gray that we can to make their projects go forward. So we do try.
And thank the Lord for the obviating of or vacating the gas rules, right?
Yes,
You can have natural gas in your house?
you can.
Mike's looking at me saying, maybe.
well, it's,
You want this?
Mike Wilson, Building and Planning. You're referring to Initiative 2066. Yeah, so currently the position of the BIAW is that the decision of the initiative is that it renders the prohibition of gas, or not prohibition, the restrictiveness of gas as unenforceable. However, the State Building Code Council is yet to take it up in that way. So we have to see how this plays out. We talked to Doug about this last week. So currently, you know, they disincentivize the use of gas is what it comes down to. And all the aspects of doing so, it's the position of the BIAW that that portion of it's unenforceable. So like I said, have to wait and see if SBCC does at this point.
What does the Bureau of Indian Affairs have to do with this?
Yeah, AW is the building. It's a regional building association that is, you know, very much involved with all of this. Huge membership, and they've been pushing this from the beginning. Currently, I said it's at the doorstep of the State Building Code Council, and to see how they're going to modify the code as it's written and to reflect the will of the people. No further comment.
I know what you're thinking.
The will of the people will prevail, correct? Correct. Okay.
until they change your mind.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Finance Department presentation, and this is for the entire, this is an overview of the entire county budget to actuals. The first slide is our revenue versus expenses through November. And so for general fund, we had projected revenue for the year of a little over 51 million. And these are actuals. I'm sorry, this is not budget, this is actual. So 51 million. Our expenses currently are sitting at 56 million, which is showing a deficit of around 5 million. So I had projected in a workshop earlier when we were talking about the 2025 budget that we would probably end this year on the general fund as a deficit. We still have at least a couple of more months worth of sales tax revenue that will be posted on the revenue side that is missing because we won't receive our disbursement from the state for November and December sales tax until early 2025. And then we have a few more, a couple more payrolls that we'll post, which are our largest expenses. So I do believe we're still going to end the year with a deficit on our general fund, but as I presented, we have sufficient fund balance there. And on the county road,
One question back on.
yes,
On that, so I understand that the state usually is late, so we get, some revenue is posted after the end of the year. How about expenses? At the end of the year, are we pretty close on that?
we're pretty close on that. There's,
So do
there's
you
one
expect-
payroll usually.
Okay, so we expect to be a shortfall, but do you expect that gap to close?
Somewhat. I think it's still going to be approaching, it will approach the 5 million mark, I believe.
Okay,
That's what I had forecasted a couple of weeks ago when I put the numbers together. So it'll
Okay.
be close to 5 million. I just don't think I don't think it's going to grow any more than this for sure. I think it's going to actually close a little bit more.
okay.
On the county road, right now, we're sitting at 22, and on our revenue general fund, just to point out, most of our property tax collections are fully in because they were due October 31st, I believe. And so this includes those collection. We still have a little bit of collection still on the books, but for example, we budgeted you'll see later, we budgeted 19 million. We've already brought in 19.4, almost 19.5 million in property tax collections. So those are primarily in. It's just those sales tax that are not in. Same thing for county road. Their property tax collections are virtually all in. So they've got 22 million of revenues, and then they've got currently sitting at 18.7 million of expenses. They're showing a surplus, but I know that they have some expenses still that will be paid related to some of their road projects for this fourth quarter. Health department, they're showing revenues of almost 3.8 million, and they have expenses of 2.7. So they're showing a surplus right now of a little over $1 million. And building and planning, they're showing revenues year to date through November 2.5 and expenses of $2.4 million. Very, very close to break even on theirs.
So I'm trying to look at the building and planning because we just got presented numbers and I'm trying to match them up and I can't.
Make sure. Well, they do match the building and planning total revenue. Matches the building and planning total revenue slide. 2.567, 2.567.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked at the budget, not the actuals.
Yeah, the actuals.
bad.
These are actuals.
Yeah.
And then the expenses, 2.39, 2.39.
I'm glad about that answer.
Yay, they
I was
match.
getting worried.
They match, no. And like we said, because they're down on their expenses, they're pretty close to break even. And I don't anticipate this to change drastically.
And the health department actually is going to be in a surplus?
I'm not sure because they usually have a grant, there's a grant that they receive funds in, and sometimes they return some of those funds. So I'm not entirely sure that this is how they'll end up the year.
Okay. I would normally think it'd zero out or
Yeah,
pretty
it's very
close.
close. Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Or at times they're pulling back using some of their fund balance.
Because the majority of their stuff is all,
Majority of their stuff is reimbursable
Reimbursement.
grants.
yeah,
Mhm. And then they do have, their revenues. But their larger revenues are grants.
right.
They too have a little bit of sales tax that will, no, I think I'm wrong there, but anyway. So then my next slide is really revenues at a glance, budget versus actual. And so in the general fund, the three largest revenues that we have, of course, are property tax. Like I said, we've got budgeted 19.8. We've brought in so far through November, almost 19.5. So we're at 98%. And tracking with where we were exactly last year. And then the sales tax, we've budgeted 11.4. This is the amended number that I reduced at one of our budget amendments. Our actuals through November are 7.4. And so I know that we're down, going to be down at least about $1 million compared to last year. So I have some additional information on that one in a minute. And then timber excise tax, we had a budget of 870,000. We've brought in 671,000. So we're a little bit lower than last year on that particular line item as well. The general.
So you expect to be around 96% if we use 2023 as a.
Yeah.
And the shortfall from the 100%, that comes out of the ending fund balance, right?
Yes, yes.
So last year we were short. How about the year before?
The year before, 2022, we actually were not short. We contributed to fund balance. And then in 2023, we're close to about $1 million dipping into fund balance.
Yeah, that in your experience, the fluctuation is that 5% would be on the high side?
Yeah,
I mean, year to year, because we budget and things move, we should be high in some years and low in
and
others.
others, right. And this year, one of the things that we did notice is that vacancies or position vacancies, we had less vacancies than we had in previous years. So that's also contributing.
We had more retirements also.
I don't know on that.
Hmm.
But I know that we basically are tracking a little bit higher on our personal expenses than we did last year in 23. And that's due to a little bit less vacancies. Some of the other areas in general fund for revenues, the pub privilege tax, we amended that budget, so that's why it's showing at 100%. And so these other are very small, the excise tax on those, on marijuana and liquor beer license excise tax.
You know, for Mr. Dahl, the marijuana tax numbers that get to Olympia are huge. And you
Yeah.
look at this number and you say, really?
Yeah.
I know
We're very small.
One of the initiatives from WASAC is to ask for more on that because it is a big disparity.
Yeah.
the history of Wasac, I believe, is that it was organized back when Prohibition ended and the state was delivering the taxes. And so this county is formed an organization. Cities did the same thing to go after that liquor tax.
Oh,
And that was the original impetus for getting that.
And these are actually categorized in the financials as intergovernmental. And then when we look at our goods and services, another area of revenue for general fund, we're pretty much on track with those. We amended our budgets, and it's kind of interesting. The totals are exactly the same. So it's kind of a little interesting there. But anyway, so our jail and booking, our motor vehicle license tax, we're a little bit higher than what we budgeted. And then our additional goods and services were a little bit lower than what we budgeted, but in total, we're right on track. I'm going to go back and check those totals. There might be something wrong with our formulas because they're all the same, and that just doesn't make any sense.
so, gentlemen, I'm really surprised that the jail booking fees are that low.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and check this,
Oh, okay,
this chart.
specifically
There's
those.
something doesn't look quite right because our jail and booking fees for all the cities, it's closer to $1 million. So
More,
it
okay.
looks like we picked up a formula wrong when we pushed it over to this chart. So I'm going to go back and look at all that.
I would imagine that the city's contribution to the jails has shown a sharp increase because of that shift
is.
in felony drug possession to gross misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Doesn't take very long to talk to our city
Yeah.
partners and they bring that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, well, we're not complaining.
Yeah, so I just think this part of the chart probably I need to redo it. I'll send you out a new sheet on this one. For county road, like we said, that we budgeted a little over 20 million for these taxes. And we brought in 20.2 million. We budgeted 20.8 million. So we're tracking pretty nicely. We're at 97% of budget there. And then we have another motor vehicle fuel tax that's has a few more months of those revenues coming in. So that's why it's showing it's budgeted at 1.9 and we're sitting right now almost at 1.2 million. And so it's a little lower than
Isn't
last
that a
year.
bit of a reflection of the shifting to EVs? There's less motor fuel being purchased per miles.
Statewide, they're showing this one. I know we're tracking with the state. It's lower. It's coming in a little bit lower.
And that is not based on what we collect within our boundaries. It's a per capita share
Right,
of the
it's
state.
per capita.
So as the state's goes down,
Right.
then ours is
We-
reflected. I mean, a third down, that's more than just a month's can make up. So
Yeah.
that's
Not that I'm
interesting.
suspicious, but thank you for those questions. Yeah, this is a puzzling thing. I didn't think we had enough EVs out there to have that sizable impact.
Probably not here, but up north, that's
Right, I'm still thinking of it per capita in this
Yeah.
state completely. And I'm just wondering how much finagling is done up there. Because that doesn't compute in my head.
The other thing that is always a complicating factor is the timber revenues. Because it depends on what DNR harvests, and they don't harvest the same amount every year. And it's very, It's very
It
difficult to
fluctuates.
predict.
Yeah.
Typically, we budget based on some kind of a formula from last year's amount.
Right. And then
And-
that's the other one that we were telling you about, that on the timber tax, you have the different tiers. And we're not in the first tier. We're in a later tier. First tier are the school districts is what I remember. So,
And the timber tax applies to timber in the county, right?
Right, the harvest in the
mhm,
county.
harvested in
That's
our
both
county.
publicly owned and privately owned.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
both.
somewhere else, there's income based on our own forests that we turned over to DNR back in the 30s. That's the timber trust income.
Yeah, timber trust.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you live in Cowlitz County, but you have property in Thurston, you pay and you harvest, it stays in, tax stays in Thurston then. It doesn't come to the owner.
Typically, they just made a change and Wasack was involved in that. The Timber Caucus that I sat on was involved in that because a handful of counties are really hammered by environmental restrictions. They've got, and they don't have much in the way of business. Pacific County, Wahkiakum County, Skamania County in particular. And then the marbled murrelet has also added restrictions to what can be harvested off of public lands. And that also includes Clallam and Jefferson and Grays Harbor. And so they designed a formula where the state can begin purchasing timber in other counties that can be used to offset the losses in Wahkiakum and Skamania and those
Oh.
things. Very, very complicated and
We have a set of rules that'll mess you up, so we'll make another more complex set of
Yes.
rules to try to unmess you up. Meanwhile, we all go to the bank with an extra paycheck.
Yeah.
well, of course, the challenge is if the timber revenues don't go to the home county, that's a loss of income
Mhm.
for the home counties. So the home counties have a veto on whether they can purchase within their county boundaries, but on the other hand, the state subsidizes those counties and it comes from revenue somehow. And this is at least one way of recognizing a nexus with timber.
And then the last item on this sheet has the behavioral health tax. And of course, this is the one that was sunsetted. So that's all the revenue that we're going to receive for the year is $752,000.
So Kathy, I think there might be an error in, you have the timber excise tax listed twice. And they're exactly the same numbers. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if one was supposed to be the timber trust income.
Well, one is county, there is a timber excise tax that goes for the roads. And so one is general fund, so it may have picked up the wrong one twice.
Okay.
This whole sheet, I'm going to go back and recheck it. This is one where we're snipping pieces from another spreadsheet and putting it for this one to just give you a glance. And so we probably pulled them in wrong.
This presentation, I like a lot. This is
Yes, I
very
was just going to
useful.
say, yes, that we're not,
I-
we've never seen this before. This is good.
Right, this is really good.
Helps us
In-
understand.
In the future, I hope we reach a point where you don't manually pull it
Yeah.
up. But we have the IT manager or the IT director. He'll take care of that for us.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll put it on his list. Yeah, so all of this data comes from PeopleSoft. So we're doing downloads to get the data. We do the expenses also by fund to show you our expenses. So compared to budget, so on the general fund, we've budgeted almost $75 million in total for expenses. And our actuals this year right now are sitting at 56 million, 56.4. We still have a couple of payrolls that we'll be posting, but for the most part, I'm not aware of anything major. We have a debt service payment that's December, so we will have a pop in that line before the end of the year. So we have budgeted 2.6. We'll have a little bit over, I think about $2 million that we'll be posting here in December. Some of the other lines for general fund, I don't anticipate a lot of movement other than in personnel and debt service, and a few more transfers need to take place. And I'll be talking about one of those later. And when we talk about budget amendment, we will be making the transfer from general fund to the budget stabilization fund in the month of December. And so that hasn't taken place yet. And that's close to $600,000. So on building and planning in total, we have budgeted a little over $3 million of expenses for that, and they're sitting at $2.4 million. And then county road, we've budgeted $33.7 million, and we're sitting at $18.7 million. Part of county road budget involves some ARPA money that was budgeted for the year, which now will be pushed over to 25 and 26, primarily 25. So that's why their capital expenditures are so much lower than what we have budgeted. And then for health department, budget and total expenses 3.6, and our expenses are 2.7 right now. And so I don't anticipate any significant other expenses there other than some of the personnel expenses for the rest of the year. So
as a generalization, approximately the budget is approximately close to 10% too high in most instances.
budget too high versus actuals.
Right.
I think that's probably a good anticipation. I think on personnel, what I remember from the general fund, where we ran about 86% of budget on personnel.
Yeah.
For personnel and benefits because of vacancies. So
I think for me, as long as we know what the rule of thumb is, we can handle it. But in general, I'm thinking budgets should be closer, but.
yeah.
I know when Rick Dahl was in the bank, if it came in within 25%, he'd be happy. Said with a lot of, with a lot of joke.
Yeah. So, but the good news is, monitoring the budgets versus actual, we have a handle on looking at that every month and using some trend analysis, like you said. I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't anticipate in any of these funds, basically at this point in time, that we will ever exceed budget. So. And then the next slide is so that you can see the actual general fund property taxes. I like to show this one so you'll have a pulse on versus cash flow. We've brought in, like we said, we have beginning of the year, they start off with receivables of about a little over 20 million. We have brought in year to date 19.5 million. That includes bringing in some funds for prior year property tax collections that are still outstanding. But we're well on our way to bringing in, I think on trend, I usually have a little analysis that they bring in close to over 99% of the property taxes bill, sitting out there billed is collected. So we're sitting pretty well on that. And this is through November, so we still have one additional month to collect.
It's always amazing how some people take their time on paying their property taxes.
Yeah.
2016, we still have somebody owing us money.
On sales tax, the next slide is to get you to see where we're at. You know, most of the year we've been below what we were compared to prior year. For some reason, August, which came in like 16% lower than prior year. But for the good news is, if anything, September was the first month that we were actually very, very close to the number that we had in prior year. We had brought in last year 1,099,000, and this year we brought in 1,097,000. So hopefully, I'm anticipating that October, November, December, as of right now, we still actually have 3 months of revenues to come in.
Thank goodness for school starting in September. That generates those sales,
Yeah,
back to
sure.
school sales. Yeah.
So we did adjust our budget downward, and so we're sitting at about 72% of our budget. And our target is more like 75% that we should be at right now. So we're still down slightly. Recording fee, we presented both things. They're actual transactions. They've had some up months, some down months, mostly up months compared to prior year. And then for the recording fee revenue, they actually are very close to probably break even. The month of November, they actually recorded about a little over $20,000 less than they did in the prior year. But overall, they're pretty close to the prior year as opposed to the sales tax trends. And that's all I have on finance.
Well, I'll just repeat, I think this was a very useful presentation. And I guess it'll be, I would use this more frequently is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think we've tweaked it as we've gone on during the year. So I've appreciated all your comments and feedback. So we'll continue to look at this and see what meaningful information we can present to the board. So, but I thank you for all your help on getting a good financial for you to have each month. The next one is that we'll go over is IT, and I'll have Travis join me. So for IT, we have the very first one is their regular operating account, which is their Fund 50201. And from a revenue standpoint, they are right on track with their revenues, the budgets for revenues, with the one exception of other financing sources. This is money that they expected to come in, get reimbursed for some ARPA expenses. And so they still have another billing they need to do to collect some additional funds. That one, I don't think we're going to collect the full, what we had over budgeted that one a little bit. I had put in 300,000 for that budget. So I think it's going to be closer to 200,000. So on the revenue side, I don't see any issues with their meeting their budget. And in fact, in some cases, they're exceeding their budget. On their,
We're still at the 50201.
yes, 50201.
Why wouldn't we always meet the budget? Because the way we do it,
Well, we do on the goods and services. That's where we bill the other departments.
right?
And they exceeded, they had a little bit additional on a reimbursement grant, governmental,
Mhm.
that we didn't budget for. And then the miscellaneous is their investment income. So that one is exceeded. On other financing sources, we just had an estimated amount for the ARPA. And so I think I had overestimated that one. On the expenses, their expenses on personnel, they have a budget of 1.8 million. They're at almost 1.5 through November. This is due to some vacancies that they have. As you can see, their filled positions are 11. Their open positions are about 5 positions as of right now. On supplies is where they have their maintenance contracts. And that's one of their largest items there. They've budgeted 1.973, and they have actuals currently at 1.8. We still have about 200,000 of maintenance contracts that still need to be paid. So I am going to be presenting for tomorrow a budget amendment on theirs to increase this line item a slight amount. We had a couple of minor equipment purchases that exceeded budget. And so we just need to do a very slight adjustment on that line.
So under supplies is where the maintenance contracts are?
Yes, all of the maintenance, software maintenance contracts are there, as well as minor equipment purchases. And so those are some of their 2 larger expenditure, and professional services. They also have some professional services for some out contracting for services to assist them while they have some shortage in personnel. There are other category services. They're under budget currently on that line. And capital, they're pretty much right on track with their budget. And then their transfers, that was primarily monies that we transferred from this fund over to the reserve fund. It had, we needed to do a catch up for some prior year fund balances. So I don't anticipate, that's the only amendment I anticipate that we'll do, and we'll be putting that forward for approval tomorrow.
So Kathy, I had a little bit of a question regarding an action we took with the budget. I think it was the Sheriff's Department asked for independence from IT in terms of managing their own computer systems. Did I?
For some of their IT related, they're like regular laptops. They're very specialized pieces of equipment. That's been pulled right now. That was,
Okay.
For the 2025 budget, they were asking for a new fund for equipment replacement, which would include IT as well as some other items that they're currently in motor pool, like for the radios. And so that's pulled right now, but they're still looking for it, and they still want to come back and
So
investigate that.
the reason for my question is whether or not that is sort of the camel sticking its nose under the tent for all the other departments. Why shouldn't all the departments do that if it's a good thing for one department?
Yeah.
And is that part of the issue for having pulled the request off the agenda?
Well, we had originally thought that it would qualify as a special revenue fund. And then when we talked with the auditor's office, they felt like it didn't qualify for a special revenue fund. And that's the major reason why it was pulled off. But as a department, they do have some of the larger expenditures for equipment replacement over the county other than IT. And so they have radios, body cams.
Right.
They have their rugged laptops. They have drones. They have a lot of equipment purchases. So it's understandable that they're asking to be able to manage their own equipment replacement funds. But we need to do some more investigation as far as what's an appropriate fund and whether it makes sense. So we're committed to go back and look at that and talk with the auditor's office about it before we bring it to the board.
Is that the state auditors or downstairs?
Downstairs, it's our auditor's office, yeah. So,
Okay.
and if we need to consult with them as well, but right now we just need to put everything together and look at it one more time, so.
I mean, I think the state law makes a differentiation about central services which includes information technology. So I was a little concerned when they brought it up that this was kind of beginning perhaps a new trend. I mean,
Right.
Everybody wants to manage their own budgets, but
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the way the system is set up.
Yeah, so anyway, they have some fairly large ticket items, and so they want to be able to do planning. Otherwise, they will have some variations in their expenditures when it comes time to replace all of those items. And so anyway, they have some rationale for it, but as far as making it work, we just want to do all of our homework before we ever bring it back to the board.
Thank you.
So anyway, so on IT, the expenses that we have here, I don't believe they're gonna, other than a small budget adjustment that we're recommending for tomorrow's public hearing, they should be fine and not exceed any of their budget categories.
So the current year includes the adjustments we made to the pay scales, or does that start in January?
No, it includes adjustments to the personnel expenses.
This year?
Yeah, it was only for, I think, 1 month or I think 1 month.
Travis Foschini, IT Director. It started effective 12/1.
And so that's been accounted for in this, but we also have 5 vacancies, so. The next fund that they have is their reserve fund. And this is the fund that they have for major equipment replacements related to IT. And so their revenues primarily consist of funds brought in for transfers. But normally they don't have very much revenue in this account because it's just the investment income off that fund balance. And so I don't anticipate any additional revenues in this area. And then for their expenses, they rarely have expenses other than the planned major purchases for major equipment replacement, and they don't really have any this year. They had requested earlier in the year a little bit of minor equipment that needed to be made. I think it was a switch. And so that is in the supplies budget. And then they had a little transfer for the door access and camera systems that we put in the Hall of Justice. They contributed $50,000 towards the general fund for that. And so they have an ending fund balance of almost $5 million, which is an item we discussed when we were going over their 2025 budget. So that's
Is-
it.
The amount transferred in from the department to the reserves should match the figures from the previous page, right? From the IT department. I think there's a $30,000 difference. 2085 versus 2035.
Yeah, that transfer, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back
I'd
and
have
look
to
at the
double check
details of
yeah.
that.
It's a minor gap, but
It's exactly
sometimes those eights and
$30,000.
three- sometimes those 8s and 3s get confusing.
Yeah, but it's exactly $30,000. Oh, I think that that transfers from general fund that's made related to contribution for the laserfish from the dock recording fees. So I think that's what the difference is. That's why I think, but I'll look at it.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a transfer out. So I'm wrong. The dock fees are a transfer in.
mhm.
So I'll look at it to see if we've got something else going on, 30,000 with someplace else. Okay. That's all. I'll turn it over to Travis in case there's any operational items he wants to bring up or.
I had an additional item to bring in the consent agenda. There's a contract amendment for CHR's terms and conditions, and that amendment are adjusting their contract that was signed in 23. The effective change is basically that there's the scope of services was altered and to be more specific to the services they're providing. And then also the termination conditions are changed.
The termination has changed, how?
It matches standard language and contract language from legal.
And we use CHR for?
We use CHR for professional services and managed services. And we've had, when we first contracted with them, I think the intent was to use them for security services and some disaster and backup services. We're revising that moving forward to be more focused on some very specific recurring services related to backups, patching, which are a little bit more specific and granular. And that's what we outlined in the revision. And we also use them on an as-needed basis for additional services. So for example, when we had a loss of staff in the past several months, we've used them to offset some of the gaps with full-time employment that was lost. So another way to say that is with sysadmin services.
So primarily they bring elbow grease rather than expertise to the table?
Some of both, some elbow grease and some expertise.
And the expertise is in which areas?
System administration and security.
Okay, so if a new employee comes on board, who creates the user account?
Sorry, if a new what comes on board, a new employee?
If a new employee
Yeah.
comes on board, who creates the user account?
One of our staff members creates the user account. Typically, if there's advanced changes to that system, that account, sometimes they're involved. At this time, the intent is to change that in the future when we bring on and fill some of the current vacancies. But that's an example where they've augmented in the absence of full-time employees who've separated in recent months.
So that contract's on the consent agenda?
Yes, it is. Or it was intended to be as a late addition.
It's going to be, okay, that's why we got it today, this
Yeah.
morning. Okay.
So what it means is dollar is just this table. from the new one and the old one?
Sorry.
10,025 going up to 10,481.
That's correct. The scheduled expected recurring services are relatively negligible, as you point out there. The one thing that I'll call out is that I asked for an approval or an understanding that there would be an average of 13,000 on a monthly basis. And the idea there is that in the past months, for example, where we've used them for staffing and some backfill services, they charge us by the hour in addition to those services on an as-needed
Okay.
basis. So it's hard to predict how much that's going to be, but I think looking at it as an average per month is probably the right way to look at it.
So these were just designed to give us kind of an average cost of what we could expect, but this isn't a contractual price.
That's, well, I mean, it is contractual in that they charge us per hour
Per hour.
beyond the recurring services. So it's a way to give you an expected amount, kind of like utility. You know, you don't know exactly what you're going to pay, but you have a rate, you know, and so this has a rate based on our usage.
Right, okay.
And then there was some ambiguity there in previous years. When we started using additional rates, there was questions about whether or not that was afforded for in the contract, et cetera. So I'm just trying to call it out now for clarity.
Okay. Oh, good, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll just move into agenda item review. Looks like everything under consent. I know the sheriff was online and stuff, but it looks pretty easy. It just looks like we're renewing our contracts with the various agencies for use at the gun range. That seems pretty straightforward. That, yeah, we also have. Yeah, that's a good point. Didn't you, I forgot, you also have the public hearing too, Sheriff, I see.
That's correct. And I was getting logged in. Was that reference the animal ordinance, the hearing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Lorraine from the prosecutor's office is going to be presenting that tomorrow at 9:45, the rewrite of the county animal code.
Okay. The other stuff I was just saying, looks real standard. You're just renewing contract for use for the agencies out at the gun range.
That's correct. And the terms are remaining the same from last year. And there's one other item on there as well. It has to do with the contract with Day Wireless. And that is, actually, we've talked with them, the motor pool folks as well, and we're going to request to use them to do our new car builds instead of taking them up north to a company up there. We've had some long delays. Actually, Day Wireless came in several $1,000s less. So we want to enter an agreement with them and use them, at least do a few cars for comparison. So that's on the agenda as well for tomorrow.
Okay. Anything else? Looks good, Sheriff. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So, Gina, you have a couple items?
Hey, good morning. Gina James, Health and Human Services. We do have 2 items on the agenda for tomorrow. The first item is a consolidated contract with Washington State Department of Health to establish the general terms and conditions. So this is that consolidated contract with the state. They typically will send the general terms and conditions first, just their kind of standard contract language. And then in the new year, they start sending the amendments with the scope of work and with the various scope of works and the funding. So for tomorrow is just the general terms and conditions agreement. And then in the beginning of the calendar year, we will start seeing the amendments that have the scope of work and the funding that is connected to this contract.
Excuse me, who's the, who is the we in that case? Because Dennis and I won't be here, so we won't see it.
That's true. It will be where
I'm sorry, I had-
Commissioner Dahl and
I-
the new commissioners.
I had to do that, sorry.
See what I got to put up with. This contract always seems weird to me because I'm not used to, it's basically a blank contract.
Yeah.
It's just, it gives you the conditions and they don't fill in the dollar amounts until they kind of know what they're going to send us. So it's
Yes.
an odd thing for me, but
It is odd. It is. It's one of its kind.
yeah.
I suspect it is a justification for having a certain number of employees in Olympia. Because they certainly generate a lot of paperwork.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Any
that's the first
one?
item. The second item we have on the agenda is a contract amendment with Prevention MD, which is our contract with our health officer, Dr. Krager. So we have an amendment that we're issuing that just is extending the time period through December of 25. So it's just a 1-year amendment with our health officer. So we have that on the agenda for tomorrow as well.
Gina, isn't that more appropriate as a recommendation from the health board? Since they're the ones that, decide whether to hire or fire the health officer?
Well, they did appoint Dr. Krager this year, I guess earlier in 24, they appointed Dr. Krager as our health officer. The contract comes through the commissioners for, in order to pay our health officer.
Yeah, I think you're correct, but at this point, I think for this time, I would say it's a moot point. I would go ahead and do that as Gina plans, but it was just something not in the view of the Board of Health at the time, I think. Had it come up, I'm pretty sure it would have sailed through.
Yeah, that is a good point, though. I think we'll have to remember that before, like in the last quarter, that if they want to reappoint, I think I don't have any trouble. I think Dr. Krager's, done well for us, and I'm been pleased to have him there. So
It's just the new rules of the game, I guess.
Yeah.
And just make sure we
yeah,
double check with
It's a good reminder.
the other one. Yeah.
okay,
Okay, that's all I have. I'll see you tomorrow.
okay. Thanks, Gina.
And
Public
we have-
Works.
Yep.
I don't think we can go through a Tuesday meeting without Public Works here lately.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. That's because we're just busy and we like to keep things moving and build stuff and do things like that. So we have one contract amendment that I snuck into the consent agenda, mixed in with all the sheriffs. It's for our professional services agreement for our stormwater permit compliance. It's an extension of the date. It's item number 1. And then on the regular agenda, we have 2 additional amendments for professional service agreements. The first one is to extend the contract end date to the end of 2025, and then to increase the not to exceed amount by $30,000 to cover additional electrical and telemetry work with RH2 for the Riderwood Supplemental Water Source Project. This was requested work that we made of the contractor because we're building 2 substantial systems, 3 actually, and we do not have a modern SCADA system. So we requested that they go ahead and add a SCADA system to this project, which is the Riderwood. And then the second supplement covers the addition to the Toutle Water pump station system, upgrading and adding it to that contract. So it was additional work that we requested of the consultant.
You used an unfamiliar word, SCADA.
Oh, don't ask me what the acronym stands for, but it's our system control system. So it's when the alarms go off. So in a reservoir, your alarm will go off if your water gets too high or if it gets too low, and it calls out the crew so that they can go and see with what's going on. It also, on pump stations, it will call if your water, you get a high water alert in the pump station, or your pump is running when the level has gotten too low, it'll call the crew out so they can manually come out and solve the problem and turn the alarm off.
It's an industry standard system that it's used in the oil fields heavily. It's
Yes.
lots of places.
Water treatment plants. I know some of the wastewater and water treatment plants have their systems are so sophisticated. You can sit at home and see how much water is going in and out through the plant, what pumps are running, how much chemicals being fed at that time. A lot of industries, you can watch the lines
The
roll.
control interface too, isn't it?
Yes.
It'll go both ways.
It can go both ways if you set it up that you can change things remotely. At this point, we're just setting it up to call us. We're not going to be doing controls currently. We may move that way in the future, but right now we just want it to standardize across our systems.
When you say to call you, it's nothing you log into from your office?
You can look and see what the alarm is, log into the system and see if it's something that you think is, I need to be there in 5 minutes, or I can brush my teeth before I go.
Right, and I'm always, in a cybersecurity sense, who's got control over that? That's going to be out of public works
Yes,
and closely administered, right?
yes.
The first time I heard of something like a SCADA system was a story I heard about a guy by the name of J.D. Tennant. Tennant was the mill manager for the Long Bell lumber mill when it was built in the 1920s. And he ended up building a mansion on the hill on Mount Solo. We call it Ruther Glen. That was the name of that mansion. And he would look from his office in the mansion towards the mill and would know what's going on by the amount of smoke going out the smokestacks. They could tell if things were going wrong or right. Very primitive, obviously, not computerized at all, and nothing automatic about it. But again, a method of monitoring the processes. Things went along pretty well for most of his time in charge.
Supervisory control and data acquisition.
Thank you.
Okay,
And I brought Sean in case you had any questions about the day wireless.
that sounded pretty clear what the sheriff was saying. They'll just be outfitting our rigs versus a different place, and their bid came under, and at this point in time, they've been faster. Did I cover it all? Okay.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any miscellaneous, any questions, anything? Kathy, okay.
Excuse me, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. I normally have a handout and I forgot. I'm not all here together. So we have a public hearing on budget amendment, and we have a few budget amendment items, not a tremendous amount. We have several line items that are changing in the sheriff's office, but in total, they just have a $5,000 increase to their budget. It's expenditures. Some of it has to do with grant revenue. And so, and then we have a little bit of a change for what we need to transfer out on the non-departmental related to booking that entry for the budget stabilization fund. I had budgeted 550,000 and it's going to be more like 609,000 for that. And because it's based upon 1% of actuals for 2023 that were finalized. So that's a little bit of a change on that budget. And on the general fund, we have Parks and Recs had some additional expenses that we needed to account for, particularly for extra help due to summer, I think it's summer rentals, camp rentals, park rentals. And then that's about $4,792 to be exact. So total expenses went up 69,646 for the general fund. And we have some small additional revenues related to some grants. Most of those are in the all of those are in the sheriff's office for a total of $6,100. And so in grand total, the general fund balance will go down 63,546 is what I'm proposing. And then when it comes to some of our other expenditures, we have some small adjustments. The largest one being the budget stabilization fund, transfers in going up and their ending fund balance going up. Emergency management had some additional grant revenue, so they're going to go up 29,500. IT, as I mentioned earlier, we needed to make an adjustment for some minor equipment that wasn't budgeted. That's 173,000. And then for their professional services contract, an additional 31,000 is needed. That will come from ending fund balance. It's about 200,000. And then we'll need some additional, we're going to move some 30,000 from risk management over to the liability claims account to help account for and pay for some remediation in the annex building. And then we also have some additional expenditure on the motor pool that we're budgeting for. Well, it's actually $165,000 that the sheriff's office will be billed for some of their radio equipment replacement, anticipating that they need to do that in the next year. That's $165,000 of revenue to motor pool, and that will increase their fund balance. And I think I covered elections. This was a very expensive year for elections. I think Carolyn had alerted y'all to that. And so in looking at their expenses so that they can make it through the end of the year, they need approximately another $111,000, and that's going to come from their ending fund balance. And then law enforcement records needed to adjust for some additional vacation payouts, I think this was from a retirement maybe for law enforcement records. So we're making a adjustment, a total of 22,000, but we're covering that with their line item severance pay. So it's just getting the lines in the right place on the budget. And that's it. So that's for the public hearing tomorrow.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I think way it kind of sounds, I think cost of elections is probably going to keep going up. It keeps getting more expensive.
Yeah, that's a flabbergasting amount,
Yeah.
111,000.
Yeah. I know Carolyn was kind of taken aback by it a little bit too. But the amount.
Is that because of, is
Yeah.
that because of the recount? Or,
I'm not entirely sure, but the expenses that were in the temporary help was needed to be adjusted upward, and then also postage expense. So, and I think that's getting the ballots that were sent here and moved over to the correct counties that those belong to.
Well, we incurred some expense because Clark County, remember she was telling us Clark County lines were, they were waiting like a 2-hour wait. So they're driving up here and doing it right here. So it did create some additional stuff.
You know what I like about this? We talk about what you just said, and then the building and planning. Cowlitz County needs to franchise how it operates so that we-
Okay. Anything else? Did, I see you popped back in. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna try and grab her. I think we'll just maybe take a 5-minute recess, see if she can get Jessica in.
sure. Sounds good.
No. Oh, so don't eat the cards?
Don't
eat the-
Don't eat the pieces.
Oh, they're not edible?
I wouldn't eat them.
They've been,
All over. Yeah.
oh,
Give them love.
Cooper and Ellie?
No. Employees downstairs,
Oh.
but they've been.
he was just waiting. So we'll come
I
out.
will miss that lady's voice.
I know it. We ought to see how we put that on your alarm clock. So we'll come out of recess and go into human resources.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I have a request from Public Works today. They're requesting to fill an operator 2 position at Castle Rock with domino effect. This is due to an employee retiring at the end of the year.
Okay.
Okay. And then the only other item I have is a request for an executive session under collective bargaining.
How long do you think?
Let's say 10 minutes.
So executive session, 10 minutes for collective bargaining. Okay, we will adjourn to that. Back from executive session, no decisions were rendered. So that's it. Plus any miscellaneous before we adjourn?
No miscellaneous, I guess.
Okay. We will adjourn. Thank you.